The hammer slipped from Eleanor's frozen fingers and cracked against the ground. She was 8 months pregnant, standing on a ladder in December wind, and Silas Crawford had just kicked over the posts she'd spent 3 days setting. "Pick that hammer up again," Silas said, his voice cold as the frost on her window pane, "and I'll burn this whole thing down with you inside it. A woman alone ain't meant to survive winter. You'll marry me or you'll bury that baby come spring." Eleanor climbed down slowly, one hand pressed against her swollen belly. She looked at the scattered lumber. She looked at Silas. She looked at the neighbors gathered at the bottom of the hill. She picked up the hammer. "Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel and follow my mother's story to the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far her courage has traveled. Because what Eleanor May Callahan built that winter saved more lives than anyone could have imagined." Bitter Creek Hollow, West Virginia, November 1934. Folks still remember where they were standing when Thomas Callahan's widow started acting crazy. That's what they called it. Crazy. Because what else do you call a pregnant woman hauling lumber up a frozen hillside 3 months after burying her husband? Eleanor had buried Thomas on September 15th. Mining accident. Cave-in at Blackwater No. 7. 17 men went down that morning. 14 came back. Thomas wasn't one of them. They never found his body. The company said digging was too dangerous, too expensive. Eleanor buried an empty coffin and stood at the graveside 5 months pregnant, listening to the preacher talk about God's mysterious ways. She didn't cry. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. That night, she sat alone in the cabin Thomas built and counted what remained. $47. A cord and a half of green firewood. Enough food for 6 weeks. And a baby coming who would need warmth milk and a mother who hadn't frozen to death. The numbers didn't work. No matter how she added them, the numbers didn't work. So Eleanor did the only thing she could. She remembered what her father taught her. James Whitmore had been a shipbuilder on the Chesapeake Bay. He died of fever in 29, 5 years before Eleanor lost Thomas. But his lessons stayed alive. "Ellie Mae," he used to say, sitting on the dock with his pipe. "You know why most boats rot. It ain't the water outside. It's moisture trapped inside. Can't escape, can't breathe. Give wood air, let it move, and it lives forever." Eleanor remembered those words now. She thought about the firewood stacked outside getting wetter every time it rained. Wet wood burned slow. Wet wood smoked. Wet wood used twice the fuel because half the fire's energy went to boiling water instead of heating the home. What if she could keep her firewood dry all winter? She got out of bed in the dark, lit a candle, and started sketching. By morning, she had a plan. November 3rd, 1934, 8:14 in the morning. Old Samuel Hendricks was the first to see what Eleanor was doing. He was walking back from checking traps when he spotted her on the hill measuring ground with a rope. "Eleanor, what in God's name are you doing?" "Measuring." "For what?" "Something my daddy taught me." Samuel climbed the hill. His knees complained with every step. When he reached her, he saw she'd been at this for hours. Her hands were red and raw. Her breath came in short gasps. "You shouldn't be doing this. Not in your condition." "My condition is that I'll freeze to death if I don't." She didn't look up. "Unless you've got another solution. You could marry. Silas Crawford's been asking." Eleanor's hand stopped. When she looked up, something in her eyes made Samuel step back. Not anger. Something harder. "I'd rather freeze." She went back to measuring. November 5th, 1934. 2:33 in the afternoon. The structure began to take shape, and the talk began with it. Eleanor was building posts 3 feet out from every wall of her cabin. Between them, she nailed horizontal boards, creating what looked like a second larger cabin surrounding the first. "She's building a coffin," Martha Perkins declared at the quilting circle. "For herself and that poor baby." "Grief's made her lose her mind," Ruth Crawford agreed. Ruth was Silas's mother, a thin-lipped woman who ran the Crawford family with iron hands. Someone ought to stop her. Someone ought to marry her, Ruth added. My Silas has been patient. He's offering security, a name for that baby. Martha nodded. What does Eleanor say? Eleanor doesn't know what's good for her. Ruth's needle moved in precise stitches. Winter will teach her. Nobody mentioned that Eleanor hadn't been invited to the quilting circle. Nobody mentioned that she hadn't been invited anywhere. November 8, 1934, 4:17 in the afternoon. Silas Crawford came calling on a gray afternoon. Eleanor was on her knees digging post holes with a hand spade when his shadow fell across her. That ain't woman's work. She didn't look up. Then it's good there ain't a man around. There could be. He squatted next to her close enough she could smell tobacco and whiskey on his breath. I could be here every day, Eleanor. Taking care of you. Taking care of that baby. Just say one word. No. That's not the word I meant. It's the only one you're getting. Silas grabbed her wrist, twisting until the spade fell. Eleanor gasped. His grip was iron. Listen to me. The false friendliness was gone. I've been patient. I watched you play pretend with that Callahan boy for 3 years. Now he's dead, and you're carrying his baby, and you're still acting too good for me. He pulled her closer. You're not too good for anyone. You're a pregnant widow with nothing. I'm offering you a life. Stop being stubborn. The baby kicked, hard. Eleanor looked him in the eye. Let go of me. Or what? She spat in his face. Silas released her like he'd been burned, stumbling back, wiping his face. Shock turned to rage. You're going to regret that. I regret letting you get this close. Eleanor picked up her spade. Get off my land before I put this through your skull. Silas stood slowly. His eyes were different now. The pretense was gone. You think you're strong. You think you can do this alone. He smiled, and it was the coldest thing Eleanor had ever seen. Winter's coming. When you're freezing, when that baby's crying, you remember this moment. You remember I offered everything, and you threw it back. He walked away. Eleanor watched him go. Her wrist throbbed. Her hands shook. But she picked up the spade and went back to digging. November 19th, 1934. 6:03 in the morning. The first sabotage happened before dawn. Eleanor woke to find 3 posts pulled from the ground and thrown down the hillside. The holes she'd spent 2 days digging were filled with rocks and debris. She stood there looking at the destruction. Then she got her spade and started over. November 23rd, 1934. 7:44 in the morning. The second attack came 4 days later. Someone had taken a saw to her lumber pile. Boards she'd carefully measured were now in useless pieces. Eleanor walked to the general store. Every conversation stopped when she entered. I need lumber, she told Henry Cooper. Same as before, 200 board feet. Henry looked uncomfortable. I don't know if I can help you. You had plenty last week. That was last week. Eleanor turned. Silas Crawford was leaning against the wall by the door, smiling. Having trouble. You cut my boards. That's a serious accusation. Got any proof? She didn't. They both knew it. You pulled my posts too. Mountains are dangerous. His smile widened. All kinds of things happen. Animals, wind, bad luck. He stepped closer. Especially to women who don't know their place. Eleanor felt the baby kick. Is that a threat? It's a fact. He lowered his voice. Come on, Eleanor. Stop fighting. You can't win. Say yes and your troubles disappear. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. My father used to say pride is the most expensive thing a man can own. But he was wrong. It's not pride that costs most. It's giving up. She walked past him. You'll change your mind, he called after her. When the cold comes. Eleanor kept walking. She had no idea where she'd find lumber now. But she wasn't giving up. November 23, 1934. 5:52 in the evening. Samuel found her in the woods looking for deadfall trees. "Eleanor, it's almost dark. What are you doing?" "Looking for wood." She was leaning against an oak, breathing hard. "Store won't sell to me." "Silas, Silas." Samuel spat on the ground. "That man's been no good since he was a boy. He thinks I'll give up. Will you?" Eleanor looked at him with hard, bright eyes. "What do you think?" Samuel was quiet. Then he nodded slowly. "I got boards in my barn, left over from the chicken coop, maybe 60 feet. Not much, but something. I can't pay you." "Did I ask?" "Silas will find out." Samuel snorted. "I'm 74 years old. Lived through 2 wars, 3 famines, and 47 years of marriage. If Silas Crawford wants to come after me, he's welcome to try." Eleanor almost smiled. "Why are you helping me?" Samuel thought about it. "Your daddy. The boats he built. Best I ever saw. He never did things the easy way. If he thought there was a better way, he'd build it, even if everyone said he was crazy." He looked at her structure. "I don't know if what you're building will work, but your daddy didn't raise no fool, and Thomas Callahan didn't marry no quitter." He tipped his hat. "I'll have that lumber here tomorrow morning." He walked away. Eleanor stood alone, one hand on her belly. "We're going to make it," she whispered. "I don't know how, but we're going to make it." The baby kicked. She took it as yes. November 27, 1934, 9:33 in the morning. Mary Fletcher started coming every afternoon. She was an old widow who lived at the edge of the hollow and didn't care what anyone thought. She brought food. "You're eating for 2, she said, pressing a basket into Eleanor's hands. "Can't build nothing if you fall over dead." "People will talk." "People talk anyway. Might as well give them something worth talking about." Mary came every day after that. She couldn't help with building, but she made sure Eleanor ate, made sure she rested when the baby demanded it. "You remind me of myself," Mary said one afternoon, "when I was young, before I learned to do what I was told." "What happened?" "I did what I was told, got married, had children, buried a husband." She shrugged. "Always wondered what would have happened if I'd been braver." She looked at the structure. "This thing you're making. Might work, might not. But at least you're making it. At least you're trying." Eleanor stopped hammering. "Do you think I'm crazy?" "Oh, honey," Mary laughed. "I know you're crazy, but crazy ain't always bad. Sometimes crazy is the only thing that makes sense." December 4th, 1934, 2:14 in the afternoon. The structure grew despite everything. Board by board, nail by nail. The outer shell took shape, wrapping around her cabin like a protective embrace. Eleanor left gaps at the bottom for ventilation. She extended the roof far beyond the walls for deep eaves that would shed rain and snow. Inside the 3-foot gap, she began stacking firewood in careful rows, bark side out, allowing air to circulate. The wood would dry under protection. Protected from rain, snow, and wind, but open to air. By the time she put it on the fire, it would be seasoned. Ready. It would catch fast, burn clean, give off twice the heat. That was the theory. Now she just had to survive long enough to prove it. December 10th, 1934, 4:37 in the afternoon. Ruth Crawford came to visit. Eleanor was inside resting when she heard the knock. She opened the door expecting Mary or Samuel. Instead, she found Silas's mother. "Mrs. Crawford?" "Mrs. Callahan." Ruth's face was neutral. "May I come in?" Every instinct said no, but Eleanor stepped aside. Ruth sat without being invited. "I've come to apologize." Eleanor almost laughed. "Have you?" "I'm capable of admitting when I'm wrong." Ruth met her eyes. "I told my son you would break. That winter would teach you your place. I was wrong. Yes, you were. I underestimated you. I saw a pregnant widow with nothing and assumed you were weak. Ruth's voice was flat. I've been managing weak people my whole life. What I don't know how to handle is strength. Eleanor shifted. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand. Ruth reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. This is everything I've saved. $47. I want to give it to you. Eleanor stared. Why? Because you're going to need it. What you've built, what you're teaching, it's going to grow. Growth costs money. I don't want your money. I know, that's why I'm offering it. Ruth set the pouch on the table. My grandson is alive because of medicine you gave Silas. The honey and elderflower turned his fever. The doctor said Tommy would have died without it. Her voice wavered. I don't like owing people. This is me balancing the scales. She walked to the door. Mrs. Crawford. Ruth stopped. Thank you. Ruth nodded once and stepped into the cold. Eleanor looked at the leather pouch. $47. Enough for lumber. Enough to change lives. The scales weren't balanced. But it was a start. December 12, 1934. 3:22 in the afternoon. Silas came back on a cold afternoon when clouds hung low and heavy. Eleanor was up on the ladder nailing final boards when she heard his voice. Quite a sight. Pregnant woman on a ladder in December. She didn't look down. My plan is to finish this wall. It's not going to work, you know. Whatever you think you're building, it won't save you. His voice was different, calmer, more dangerous. Storm's coming, big one. 3-4 days of hell. I'm prepared. Are you? She heard him moving closer. 8 months pregnant, working alone. Structure ain't finished. If the storm hits before you're done, then I'll die. You've told me. No, you won't die. His voice dropped. You'll suffer. You'll freeze and watch that baby get weaker. Around the second day you'll realize I was right. He was right behind her now. And when you're desperate enough, I'll come. I'll bring food, blankets, firewood. And this time, you'll say yes. Eleanor drove the last nail home. She turned on the ladder. You know what I think you're scared. Something flickered in his eyes. I think you've been watching me work, and you're starting to realize I might survive. That this structure might work. That come spring, I'll still be here refusing you. She climbed down slowly. And that terrifies you. Because if I survive, everyone knows you couldn't break me. She stood before him, belly between them. So here's my offer. Walk away. Leave me alone. When I survive this winter, we're even. You never bother me again. Silas's face twisted. You think you can bargain with me? I think I'm still standing. Every day I stand is a day you lose. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Silas smiled. Cold. Terrible. We'll see who's standing after the storm. He walked away. Eleanor watched him go. Then she turned back to the ladder. She had work to do. December 12th, 1934. 6:44 in the evening. It happened 3 hours later. Eleanor was inside the gap stacking firewood when she heard the ladder creak. She looked up. Silas was at the top. Changed my mind. Don't want to wait for the storm. He grabbed her arm. She tried to pull away, but he yanked hard. Her feet slipped on frozen boards. Silas, don't the baby? Should have thought about that before you spat in my face. He twisted her arm behind her back. Pain exploded through her shoulder. She screamed. That's it. Scream. Nobody's coming. He was dragging her toward the edge, toward the 15-foot drop. The baby kicked. Eleanor stopped fighting. Silas relaxed his grip for 1 second. Eleanor drove her elbow into his ribs. He grunted. She spun, grabbed a board, and swung at his head. It connected with a crack. Silas stumbled. His foot missed the ladder. His arms pinwheeled. He fell. Eleanor watched him hit the ground, watched him lie groaning, watched him push himself to his knees. She dropped his hat over the edge. Next time, I won't miss. Silas looked up, blood trickling from his forehead. This ain't over. Yes, it is. Come near me again, I'll kill you. Send anyone else, I'll kill them too. Then I'll tell everyone what you've done. Silas got to his feet slowly. You're dead. You just don't know it. He limped away. Eleanor stood there until he disappeared. Then her legs gave out. She sat down hard, shaking. The baby kicked. Once, twice, then harder, then pain hit, tightening across her belly. Fierce, sudden. No, not yet. Please, not yet. The pain eased. She waited, terrified. It came again. She didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes, hours. Finally, the tightening spaced out. Weaker, further apart. False labor. Her body practicing. But it had felt real. Not yet, she whispered, hands on her belly. Just a little longer. The baby kicked gently. Eleanor lay on rough boards watching snowflakes fall. The storm was coming. And she wasn't finished. December 15th, 1934. 4:33 in the afternoon. Mary found her an hour later. Jesus Christ! What happened? Eleanor told her. Mary's face went through 17 emotions. I'm getting my shotgun. No. Eleanor. If you go after Silas, he wins. He wants me to react. Eleanor pushed herself up. I finish what I started. That's my answer. You could have died. I didn't. She grabbed a board's edge and pulled herself to her feet. Now help me find my hammer. I've got work to do. December 15th, 1934. 6:17 in the evening. By sunset, the structure was complete. Eleanor stood at the bottom of the hill looking up at what she'd built. It wasn't pretty. It looked exactly like what everyone said, a shed wrapped around a cabin. But it was finished. Inside that 3-foot gap, her firewood stood in careful rows, protected from wind, protected from snow, drying in the ventilated space her father taught her to create. The sky was pale and terrible. Storm coming. She rested one hand on her belly. We did it. Whatever comes next, we did it. She walked back to her cabin. Behind her, the first real snowflakes began to fall. December 16th, 1934. 4:17 in the morning. Eleanor woke to a sound she'd never heard before. A roaring, howling, screaming fury that shook the cabin walls like paper. The storm had come. She lay in bed listening. The wind wasn't blowing. It was attacking, throwing itself against the cabin with violence that felt personal. She got up slowly, one hand on her belly. The baby was quiet. Too quiet. She pressed her palm against taut skin and waited. A kick. Weak, but there. Good morning to you too, she whispered. She made her way to the window and scraped frost with her fingernail. She couldn't see anything. Not trees, not the hillside, not the structure 10 feet from her door. Just white. A solid wall of white swirling and screaming like a living thing. This wasn't a storm. This was the end of the world. December 16th, 7:22 in the morning. Eleanor's first task was fire. The hearth had burned low overnight. Cabin temperature had dropped enough that she could see her breath. She pulled on Thomas's coat and went to the door. She had to get firewood. The dry wood she'd stacked in the gap between walls. The wood that was supposed to save her life. She opened the door. Wind hit her like a fist, drove her backward, stole her breath. Snow exploded into the cabin, covering the floor in seconds. She grabbed the door frame and pulled herself forward, step by step, into the howling white. The outer structure was right there, 10 feet away, but she couldn't see it. She moved by memory, by feel, hand trailing along rough boards until she reached the corner. Then she turned, pushed through the gap, and found herself in the protected space between walls. The wind dropped. Not completely. She could still hear it screaming overhead, still feel cold biting her skin. But inside, the gap air was merely moving instead of raging. The boards she'd nailed blocked the worst of the wind. The vents let air circulate without letting the storm through. It was working. Her father's design was working. Eleanor grabbed firewood from the nearest stack. The wood felt light in her hands. Dry. Properly seasoned. She pressed her cheek against one piece and felt no moisture, no ice, no dampness. Dry wood. In the middle of the worst blizzard she'd ever seen. She carried it back inside, rebuilt the fire, and watched flames catch immediately. No hissing. No smoking. Just clean, hot fire that roared up the chimney. By 8 o'clock, the cabin was warm. By 9, she'd stopped shivering. By 10, she was eating breakfast by a fire that burned steady and strong, while outside the world tried to tear itself apart. December 16th. 2:14 in the afternoon. The first contraction hit without warning. Eleanor was stirring soup when pain wrapped around her belly like a belt being pulled tight. She gasped, dropped the spoon, grabbed the hearth's edge. Not now. Not yet. Please God, not yet. The pain eased. She stood breathing hard, waiting. Nothing happened. False labor again. Had to be. She was only 8 months along. Baby wasn't due for 4 weeks. She picked up the spoon, went back to stirring. The second contraction came 20 minutes later. Stronger. Longer. She had to put both hands on the table and lean forward, breathing through teeth. "It's too early," she said to the empty room. "You hear me? You're not ready." The baby didn't answer. The third contraction came 15 minutes after that, December 16th, 6:47 in the evening. By nightfall, Eleanor knew the truth. This wasn't false labor. This was real. She was going to have this baby tonight, alone, in the middle of the worst storm Bitter Creek Hollow had ever seen. She sat on the bed's edge, hands on her belly, feeling contractions come and go like waves. 10 minutes apart now, getting stronger, getting longer. Maybe 6 hours, maybe less. She thought about screaming for help. But who would hear? The wind was so loud she could barely hear herself think. Even if someone heard who would come, she was alone. She was going to do this alone. "Okay," she said out loud. "We can do this." She got up and started preparing. December 16th, 9:33 in the evening. Eleanor had watched her grandmother deliver babies. She'd been 12, helping Grandma Whitmore with the Cooper twins. She remembered hot water, clean cloths, the way her grandmother talked to the mother, calm and steady. She remembered the blood. She remembered the screaming. She remembered when the first baby slid out silent and her grandmother held it upside down and slapped until it wailed. "Every birth is a battle," Grandma Whitmore said afterward. "Mother against nature. You don't win by being strong. You win by being stubborn." Eleanor thought about those words as another contraction ripped through her. She was on hands and knees on the bed. Contractions were 5 minutes apart. She'd torn a sheet into strips, boiled water, sterilized scissors in fire. She was as ready as she'd ever be. "I'm stubborn," she said through gritted teeth. "Stubbornest woman in these mountains? Ask anyone." The baby kicked. "That's right. You're stubborn too. We're going to be fine." December 17th, 1934, 12:07 in the morning. Her water broke just after midnight. A rush of warm fluid soaked through her nightgown. Eleanor had expected it, but reality still shocked her. No going back now. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. Contractions changed after that. Deeper, harder, like her whole body was turning inside out. She screamed. She'd promised herself she wouldn't. No point. Nobody could hear. Screaming wasted energy. But she screamed anyway because pain was beyond anything she'd imagined. She screamed until her throat was raw. Then she kept going. December 17th. 2:41 in the morning. Something was wrong. Eleanor could feel it. The baby was trying to come pushing down with every contraction, but something was blocking it. She reached down between her legs, hand shaking. The baby's head was there, right there, but turned wrong. She could feel the skull's ridge where it should have been smooth. The baby was coming sideways instead of face down. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She knew what this meant. She'd heard stories. Babies born wrong, stuck, mothers bleeding to death while midwives tried to turn them. She was going to die. Her baby was going to die with her. Silas Crawford was going to win. The thought hit like a slap. Silas Crawford was going to win. Something ignited in Eleanor's chest. Not hope, not courage. Something older, fiercer. Something passed down through generations of Whitmore women who survived wars and famines and plagues, and men who thought they could be broken. Rage. "No," she said again, different this time. "You don't get to win, not like this." She waited for the contraction to ease. Then she reached inside herself, fingers slick with blood, and found the baby's head. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, little one. But we have to do this." She pushed, not with her body, with her hand, pushing against the skull, trying to rotate it. The baby moved, just a little, just enough. The next contraction came, and Eleanor pushed with everything she had. Pushed until she saw stars. Pushed until she thought she'd split in two. Suddenly, pressure released. The baby slid out in a rush of blood and fluid, and Eleanor caught it in shaking hands. For one terrible moment, it didn't move. December 17th. 3:04 in the morning. The baby was blue. Not crying, not moving. Just lying in Eleanor's hands, slick and still and silent. "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "No, please. Please." She remembered her grandmother, what she'd done with the Cooper twins. She turned the baby over, held it by ankles head down, slapped its back. Nothing. She slapped harder. Nothing. "Breathe!" Eleanor screamed. "Breathe! Damn you!" She slapped again, harder than she should, hard enough to leave a mark on that tiny purple back. The baby coughed, then gasped, then wailed. The sound was thin and reedy, barely audible over the howling wind. But to Eleanor, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. That's it. She was laughing now, laughing and crying, pulling the baby to her chest, wrapping it in the cleanest cloth she had. "That's it. You breathe. You keep breathing." The baby wailed again, louder. Eleanor looked down at the tiny face pressed against her chest. A girl. She had a daughter. "Hope," Eleanor whispered. "Your name is Hope." December 17th, 4:52 in the morning. The afterbirth came an hour later. Eleanor barely had strength to deal with it. But she did. She tied off the cord with thread from her sewing kit, cut it with sterilized scissors, wrapped Hope in another cloth, and held her close skin to skin. The fire was dying. She needed more wood. She couldn't move. Her body had given everything. She'd lost blood. Her legs felt like water. Her arms shook so badly she was afraid she'd drop the baby. "Just a minute," she told herself. "Just rest for 1 minute." She closed her eyes. December 17th, 7:16 in the morning. Eleanor woke to cold. The fire had gone out. Cabin temperature had dropped. Her breath fogged in the air and Hope was crying, a thin, plaintive sound that cut through exhaustion like a knife. "I'm sorry." Eleanor forced herself up, gasping at pain. "I'm sorry, baby. Mama's getting up." She looked at the hearth. Cold ashes. No flame. If she didn't get fire going, they'd both freeze. She couldn't walk. Her legs wouldn't hold her. So she crawled, across the floor to the door, out into the gap where firewood waited. The snow had drifted against outer boards, but wood inside was dry. She grabbed 2 pieces, then 2 more, and crawled back inside, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. She built the fire. Her hands shook so badly she dropped matches twice. 3 times. But she kept trying. Finally, a spark caught. Then a flame. Then dry wood was burning hot and clean. She crawled back to the bed. Picked up Hope, held her close. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Outside, the storm raged on. December 17th, 11:38 in the morning. Hope wouldn't nurse. Eleanor tried everything. She'd seen mothers nurse their babies. It looked natural, easy. It wasn't easy. Hope would latch suck for a moment, then pull away crying. Again and again. "Please," Eleanor begged. "Please, baby. You have to eat." She was so tired, so weak. She could feel herself fading from blood loss and exhaustion. If Hope didn't eat, she would die. If Eleanor didn't rest, she would die. Either way, Silas Crawford won. "No." Eleanor forced her eyes open. "We don't give up. Callahan women don't give up." She adjusted Hope's position, changed the angle, tried again. This time Hope latched. This time she stayed. Eleanor watched her daughter nurse, felt the strange pulling sensation, and cried with relief. "That's my girl," she whispered. "That's my stubborn girl." December 17th, 4:22 in the afternoon. Someone was pounding on the door. Eleanor jerked awake, arms tightening around Hope. The pounding came again. "Eleanor, Eleanor, are you in there?" Samuel's voice. "I'm here." She tried to shout, but her voice came out as a croak. She tried again. "I'm here." The door burst open. Samuel stumbled and covered head to toe in snow-face red from cold. Mary was right behind him, wrapped in so many scarves she looked like a walking pile of laundry. They both stopped dead. "Jesus Christ," Samuel whispered. "She had the baby," Mary said. "Samuel, she had the baby." Eleanor tried to smile. "Her name is Hope." Then she passed out. December 17th, 6:09 in the evening. She woke to warmth. Someone had built the fire high, cleaned blood from the floor, changed sheets, wrapped her in blankets, put a cool cloth on her forehead. Mary was sitting beside the bed holding Hope. "There she is," Mary said softly. "Welcome back." "Hope. She's fine. Perfect, actually. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs." Eleanor reached out. Mary placed the baby in her arms. Hope was sleeping now, tiny face peaceful, tiny fists curled against her chest. "How did you find me?" "Samuel." Mary nodded toward the fire where the old man was feeding another log into flames. "Crazy fool nearly killed himself getting up that hill. Snow's chest deep, but he said he had a feeling something was wrong." Samuel turned around. His face was haggard, but his eyes were bright. "That structure you built. The one everyone laughed at. You know what I saw when I came up the hill?" Eleanor shook her head. "Steam, rising through the vents in the roof. The whole thing was breathing just like you said it would." He shook his head slowly. "I've been building houses 50 years, never seen anything like it. It kept the wood dry. It kept you alive." Samuel's voice was rough. "The whole hollow's freezing. Folks are burning furniture. Their firewood's frozen solid. Won't burn worth a damn." He looked at the fire burning steady and clean. "But not you. You've got dry wood, hot fire, warm cabin." His eyes found hers. "You did it, Eleanor. You actually did it." December 18th, 1934. 9:15 in the morning. The storm was still raging, but word was spreading. Mary had gone down at first light to get more supplies. By noon, she was back with news. "Everyone's talking about you. Samuel told Jacob Perkins about the steam from your roof. Jacob told his wife. Martha told everyone at the church shelter." Church shelter. Half the hollows there, their cabins are too cold. Reverend Whitfield opened the doors, but the church is running out of wood too. Eleanor thought about that. Families she'd known all her life huddled together in a freezing church. "How much wood do I have left?" Mary stared at her. "You can't be serious." "How much?" "3 cords, maybe 4. Enough to get you through winter easy." "Then I have enough to share." Samuel was listening from across the room. "Eleanor, you just gave birth. You nearly died. You can't—" "I'm not going to let children freeze, not when I have wood to spare." She looked at Samuel. "Can you get it down the hill?" Samuel was quiet. Then he laughed. "You know what your problem is. You're too damn good for this world." He shook his head. "Yeah, I can do it. Take a few trips. Start with families that have babies, then old folks, then everyone else." "What about Silas Crawford?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. "What about him?" "His youngest is sick, real sick. Pneumonia. The cold's making it worse." Eleanor looked at Hope sleeping in her arms, thought about another child suffering because of a father's cruelty. "Give him wood too." "Eleanor, it's not the child's fault who his father is. Give him wood." Samuel nodded slowly. "You're a better woman than most." "I'm a mother, that's all." December 18th, 2:47 in the afternoon. Samuel made 3 trips down the hill before light faded. Each time he came back with news. The church received the first load with disbelief, then gratitude. Martha Perkins cried. The Reverend led a prayer. Children who'd been too cold to move were warming their hands by a fire that burned clean and hot. "They're asking how you did it," Samuel reported. "Asking about the structure, the air gaps." I told them what I understood. "When the storm breaks, I'll explain it myself." If the storm breaks, it'll break. They always do. December 19th, 1934, 8:33 in the morning. On the 3rd day, Silas Crawford came. Eleanor heard him before she saw him. Someone struggling up the hill cursing through snow. Then his voice. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you." Mary's face went pale. "Don't open that door." "He won't try anything. Not with witnesses." She handed Hope to Mary and walked to the door. Her legs were still weak, but she could stand. She opened the door. Silas looked like a different man. Face gaunt, eyes red-rimmed, clothes covered in snow and ice. He was shivering so badly he could barely stand. "My boy," he said. "Tommy, he's dying." Eleanor said nothing. "The wood you sent, it helped. Fever went down a little, but it's not enough. Doctor can't get through. Medicine isn't working. He's so cold, Eleanor, so cold." "What do you want from me?" Silas's face crumpled. All the cruelty, arrogance, cold calculation gone. What remained was just a father watching his child die. "I don't know. I just—" His voice broke. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was—" He couldn't finish. Eleanor stood in the doorway, looking at the man who tried to destroy her. "My grandmother used to say, forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about setting yourself free." She reached behind the door and pulled out a jar of honey and a pouch of dried herbs. Honey and elderflower. Mix them in hot water. Make him drink every hour. It won't cure him, but it'll help. Silas stared at the items. "Why, after everything I did?" "Because your son isn't you, and because hate is too heavy to carry when you're trying to survive." She pressed the jar and pouch into his hands. "Go. Your boy needs you." Silas looked at her for a long moment. "I was wrong about you. Wrong about everything." He turned and stumbled down the hill. Eleanor closed the door. Mary was staring at her. "How can you forgive him like that?" "I didn't forgive him. I freed myself from him. There's a difference." December 20th, 1934, 6:22 in the morning. Eleanor woke to silence. Not quiet. Silence. Complete and total. The storm had stopped. She got up slowly, still holding Hope, and walked to the window. The world was white. Snow covered everything 4 feet deep, turning the hollow into soft curves and gentle slopes. Trees were buried to their lower branches. Above it all, the sun was rising. Golden light spilled across snow, turning it to diamonds. Eleanor had never seen anything so beautiful. "Look," she whispered to Hope. "Look what we survived." December 20th, 10:14 in the morning. They came up the hill 2 hours later. Samuel first, then Mary, then Jacob Perkins and Martha, then others one by one struggling up the hillside to see the structure everyone had laughed at. They stood in a half circle staring at boards and gaps and vents that made no sense. "I don't understand," Jacob said. "It's just a shell. How does that keep anything warm?" "It doesn't keep anything warm," Eleanor said. She was standing in the doorway, Hope in her arms. "It keeps things dry. The outer boards block weather. The gaps let air circulate. Wood inside dries out instead of getting wet." "Why does that matter?" "Because dry wood burns twice as hot as wet wood. Your firewood has been soaking up moisture every time it rains or snows. By the time you put it on fire, you're not burning wood. You're burning water. Half your fire's energy goes to boiling moisture instead of heating your home." The crowd was silent. "My wood has been drying in that gap for 2 months. Protected from rain and snow, but open to air. By the time I put it on fire, it's seasoned. Ready. It catches fast, burns clean, gives off twice the heat." Martha Perkins spoke up. "We laughed at you." "Yes, you did. We said you were crazy." "That too." Martha's face crumpled. "We could have helped. Instead we mocked you and shunned you and let Silas—" She couldn't finish. "Yes," Eleanor said. "You could have helped. But you didn't, and I survived anyway." The words hung heavy. Samuel stepped forward. "What do we do now?" Eleanor looked at him. At all of them. "Now you learn. Now I teach you what my father taught me. And next winter, every family in this hollow will have dry wood and warm cabins." She shifted Hope in her arms. "That's what we do now. We build something better together." December 20th. 3:37 in the afternoon. They were still outside asking questions when Silas Crawford appeared at the bottom of the hill. The crowd went quiet. Eleanor watched him climb toward them. He stopped at the edge of the group. "Tommy's fever broke this morning. He's going to live." Eleanor nodded. "I'm glad." Silas looked at the structure, at the cabin, at the baby in Eleanor's arms. "I spent months trying to break you. All I did was prove you're stronger than every man in this hollow combined." He turned to face the crowd. "I tore down her posts, cut her lumber, tried to force her to marry me. I tried to destroy her because she wouldn't be owned, and she survived everything I threw at her." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. "I was wrong. I was cruel and wrong. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it." He looked at Eleanor. "I can't take back what I did, but I can promise it's over. Anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through me first." Eleanor studied him. "I don't need a protector. Never did. But I'll take a neighbor. Someone who helps with the work instead of tearing it down." Silas nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Then we're done. The past is the past. What matters now is the future." She turned back to the crowd. "All of you, the storm is over. There's work to be done. Cabins to repair, families to feed, and come spring structures to build." She gestured at the shed surrounding her cabin. "Who wants to learn?" Every hand went up. December 24th, 1934, 7:15 in the evening, Christmas Eve. They gathered in Eleanor's cabin. More people than the space should hold. Samuel was there. Mary. The Perkins family. A dozen others who'd spent days digging out and beginning to understand what Eleanor had built. Hope was passed from arm to arm. Everyone wanted to hold her. The miracle baby born in the blizzard. "I have a confession," Martha Perkins said suddenly. The room went quiet. "When you started building, I told everyone you were crazy. I said you'd lost your mind. I prayed for you, but never offered to help." Martha's voice wavered. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." Others spoke up. Jacob Perkins, Ruth Crawford. One by one, confessions and apologies. Eleanor listened to all of it. When they finished, she stood. "My father used to say the only way forward is through. We can't change the past. Can't take back what we said or the help we didn't offer, but we can decide what comes next." She looked around the room. "I choose to build. I choose to teach. I choose to make sure what I survived, no one else ever has to." She raised her cup of cider. "To the future, whatever it holds." To the future. The room echoed. December 31st, 1934, 11:55 in the evening. Eleanor stood on the hill behind her cabin. Hope bundled against her chest, watching the last minutes of the year drain away. Thomas was gone. That wound would never fully heal, but hope was here, warm and alive and perfect. The structure stood solid and strong against the darkness. Down in the hollow, lights were coming on in cabin after cabin. Families gathering, communities healing, a new year beginning. "Your daddy would have been so proud," Eleanor whispered. "Of both of us." Hope made a small sound. Eleanor held her closer. "Happy New Year, little one. We made it." The last light of 1934 faded from the sky. Eleanor turned and walked back to her cabin. The fire was burning. The wood was dry. And tomorrow, there would be work to do. "I need to write approximately 5,000 words for this part." January 2nd, 1935, 7:43 in the morning. The new year brought work, and Eleanor threw herself into it like a woman possessed. Hope was 2 weeks old now, growing stronger every day, her cries louder, her grip tighter, her eyes beginning to focus on faces and firelight. Eleanor strapped her daughter to her chest with a length of cloth and went back to the hill. Back to the structure. Back to teaching anyone who would listen. Samuel Hendricks was her first student. "Show me again," he said, running his hands along the outer boards. "The gaps at the bottom. Why do they face down instead of straight out?" "Rain." Eleanor shifted Hope's weight and pointed. "If gaps faced outward, rain would drive straight through. Angled down like this, water hits the boards and runs off. Air still gets in, but moisture stays out." Samuel nodded slowly. "And the vents at the top? Hot air rises. Vents let it escape, which pulls fresh air in through bottom gaps, creates a current, keeps everything moving, keeps everything dry." "Your daddy teach you all this?" "My daddy taught me to think. The rest I figured out myself." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. "You know what you are, Eleanor Callahan. You're a goddamn engineer." "I'm a mother who didn't want to freeze, that's all." "No." Samuel shook his head. "That ain't all, not by a long shot." January 2nd. 2:15 in the afternoon. Jacob Perkins came up the hill that afternoon with a notebook and measuring tape. "I want to build one, for my family, before next winter." Eleanor looked at him. This was the same man who'd stood in Henry Cooper's store and watched Silas threaten her. The same man who'd shaken his head and called her crazy. "Why now?" Jacob's face reddened. "Because I spent 3 days in that church watching my children shiver. Because I burned every stick of furniture trying to keep them warm. Because—" his voice cracked. "Because my youngest got the cough and I thought she was going to die and I couldn't do a damn thing." He looked at the structure. "I was wrong about you. We all were. I can't change that. But I can learn." Eleanor studied him. Then she took the notebook from his hands. "Posts need to be 3 feet out from each wall. Not 2, not 4. 3. That's the distance that lets air circulate without losing too much heat from the main structure." Jacob pulled out a pencil. 3 feet. Got it. Outer boards need to overlap, not meet edge to edge. Water finds every gap. You have to assume it's going to try to get in and build accordingly. She spent 2 hours walking him through every detail. Angles of vents, depth of post holes, spacing of boards. When he finally left, his notebook was full and his eyes were bright. Thank you for teaching me. After everything. Just build it right. That's thanks enough. January 5th, 1935. 9:22 in the morning. Word spread faster than Eleanor expected. By the end of the first week, she'd had visitors from 3 neighboring hollows. Families who'd heard about the widow who survived the blizzard, who gave birth alone, who had dry firewood when everyone else was burning furniture. They came with questions, with notebooks, with doubt in their eyes that slowly turned to understanding. It's so simple. One man said, a farmer from Kettle Creek, "Why ain't nobody thought of this before?" Someone did. Shipbuilders have been using these principles for centuries. Nobody thought to apply them to houses. But why not? Eleanor looked at him steadily. Because people do what their granddaddies did. Because change is scary. Because admitting there might be a better way means admitting you've been doing it wrong. The farmer was quiet. My granddaddy lost 2 children to winter fever. My daddy lost one. I always thought that was just how it was. It doesn't have to be. No. He looked at the structure with new eyes. I reckon it doesn't. January 8th, 1935. 4:37 in the afternoon. Ruth Crawford came to visit again. Eleanor was inside nursing Hope when she heard the knock. She opened the door to find Silas's mother standing on her doorstep for the second time. Mrs. Crawford. Mrs. Callahan. Ruth's face was different now, softer somehow. May I come in? Eleanor stepped aside. Ruth sat down slowly. Her movements were stiff, careful, like something inside her had changed. Tommy is recovering well. The doctor came through yesterday, said the honey and elderflower likely saved his life. I'm glad. My son won't say it himself. He's too proud, too ashamed. Ruth met Eleanor's eyes. But I'm not. Thank you for saving my grandson when you had every reason to let him die. I told you before, the child isn't responsible for his father's sins. No, but you could have refused anyway. Most would have. Ruth paused. I spent my whole life believing that strength meant controlling others, making them do what I wanted, breaking them when they refused. She looked at Hope sleeping in Eleanor's arms. You showed me a different kind of strength, the kind that builds instead of destroys, the kind that forgives when it doesn't have to. Her voice wavered. I'm 73 years old. I've never apologized for anything in my life, never saw the point. She straightened her spine. But I'm apologizing now. For what I did. For what I let my son do. For all of it. Eleanor studied the old woman's face, the pride that was cracking, the walls that were coming down. Apology accepted. Ruth nodded once. Then she stood. The women in town want to learn about the structure, about keeping things dry. They're too afraid to ask you directly, afraid you'll turn them away after how they treated you. I won't turn anyone away. I told them you wouldn't, but hearing it from you would mean something. Ruth walked to the door. Would you consider coming to the church Sunday after next, speaking to everyone at once? Eleanor thought about it, standing in front of the people who'd mocked her, teaching the neighbors who'd abandoned her. I'll be there. January 19th, 1935. 10:33 in the morning. The church was packed. Every pew was full. People were standing along the walls, crowding the doorway, craning their necks to see. Eleanor stood at the front, Hope in her arms, looking out at faces she'd known her whole life, faces that had laughed at her, faces that had whispered behind her back, faces that were now looking at her with something she'd never seen before. Respect. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I was right and you were wrong, she began. We all know that already. What I want to talk about is why I was right. And how you can be right too. She talked for an hour. She explained the physics of moisture and heat. She drew diagrams on the chalkboard. She answered questions until her voice was hoarse. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Martha Perkins stood up. "I owe you an apology, Eleanor. A public one. I was the loudest voice calling you crazy. I told everyone who would listen that you'd lost your mind." Martha's voice shook. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Others stood up, one by one. Jacob Perkins, Henry Cooper from the general store, the Reverend himself. Apology after apology. Eleanor listened to all of it. When they finished, she spoke. "Apologies are good, but actions are better. Spring is coming. That means building season. Who wants to learn?" Every hand in the room went up. January 23, 1935, 8:14 in the morning. The first structure Eleanor helped build was for the Henderson family. George Henderson had lost his wife to childbed fever 3 years ago. He was raising 4 children alone in a cabin that leaked heat like a sieve. His eldest Sarah had developed the cough during the storm. "I can't pay you," George said when Eleanor arrived with Samuel and a wagon load of lumber. "I got nothing." "I'm not asking for payment." "Then why, we ain't never been close." Eleanor looked at Sarah, thin and pale, wrapped in blankets. "Because your daughter is sick. Because your cabin is cold. Because I can help." She picked up a hammer. "That's reason enough." They worked for 3 days. Samuel directed construction. George and his older boys did heavy lifting. Eleanor supervised correcting mistakes, explaining principles. On the 3rd day they finished. George stood back and looked at the structure. His eyes were wet. "It's beautiful. It's functional. That's what matters." "No." He shook his head. "It's beautiful. Because it means my children are going to be warm." Sarah appeared in the doorway, still pale, but with color in her cheeks. "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan, for helping my daddy." Eleanor knelt to her level. "You're welcome. But I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Get better. Grow up strong. And when you're old enough, help someone else the way we helped you." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I can do that." "Good girl." February 2nd, 1935, 11:33 in the morning. By February, Eleanor had helped design structures for 8 families. She didn't charge for her expertise. She considered it community knowledge, something that should be shared freely. But families insisted on compensating her somehow. She found herself with offers of labor livestock grain and goodwill that made her homestead more prosperous than she'd ever imagined. Jacob Perkins became her most dedicated student. The carpenter began incorporating the double shell principle into every cabin he built. "I've been thinking," he said one afternoon studying the latest design, "about what you called it, the air gap, the outer shell. Seems like it needs a proper name." "It doesn't need a name, it just needs to work. Names matter. Names help people remember, help them explain to others." He looked at her. "I think we should call it the Callahan method." Eleanor laughed. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You invented it? You taught it? You proved it works?" Jacob crossed his arms. "The Callahan method. That's what I'm calling it. That's what everyone's going to call it." Eleanor wanted to argue, but Hope chose that moment to cry, demanding attention. By the time she'd settled the baby, Jacob was gone, and the name had stuck. February 9th, 1935, 2:44 in the afternoon. The man from the newspaper arrived on a gray afternoon. He was young, barely out of school, with a notepad and nervous energy. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm James Warren from the Charleston Gazette. I'd like to interview you." "Interview me about what?" "About the Callahan method. About how you survived the blizzard. About everything." He smiled eagerly. "Our readers want to know the woman behind the method." Eleanor looked at him. "You want to write about how a poor widow survived by being clever. A story about triumph over adversity." James's smile faltered. "Well, that's part of it." "That's not the story." It's not. No. Eleanor gestured at the structure. The story isn't about me. It's about what happens when people help each other instead of tearing each other down. It's about a community that learned to do better. She looked at him steadily. If you write about me like I'm some kind of hero, you miss the point. The method isn't special because I invented it. It's special because it works. For everyone. James was quiet for a moment. So, what should I write about? Write about the Henderson family, about the Perkins family. Write about how a community can change when they stop laughing at new ideas. She paused. Write about hope. That's the real story. February 15th, 1935. 3:22 in the afternoon. The newspaper article came out a week later. James Warren had listened. He'd written about the community, about the families, about the transformation of Bitter Creek Hollow. But he'd also written about Eleanor. The headline read, "Widow's Ingenuity Saves Appalachian Community." There was a photograph of her standing in front of the structure, hope in her arms. The caption called her a pioneer of practical engineering. Eleanor read the article 3 times. "You're famous now," Mary said, peering over her shoulder. "Famous in Charleston, at least." "I didn't want to be famous." "Nobody does. But sometimes famous finds you anyway." Mary grinned. "Look at it this way. More people who read this, more people who learn the method, more people who survive next winter." "I suppose." "Don't suppose. No." Mary tapped the newspaper. "You changed something, Eleanor. Something bigger than this hollow. Might as well accept it." February 23rd, 1935. 9:15 in the morning. The first letter arrived 3 days later. Then another. Then a dozen. Then too many to count. Letters from families across West Virginia. From Kentucky. From Virginia. From Tennessee. Families who'd read about the Callahan method and wanted to know more. Some asked questions about construction. Some asked for advice about materials. Some just wanted to say thank you. Dear Mrs. Callahan. One letter read, "I built your structure around my cabin last week. For the first time in 20 years, my firewood is dry. My children are warm. My wife has stopped coughing. I don't know how to repay you, but I wanted you to know your kindness has changed our lives." Another came from a doctor in Charleston. Mrs. Callahan. "I've been practicing medicine in Appalachia for 30 years. Every winter, I lose patients to cold-related illnesses. Your method has the potential to save more lives than any medicine I've ever prescribed. I'm recommending it to every family in my practice. God bless you for what you've done." Eleanor read every letter, answered every question, and with each response, she felt her father's teachings spreading further and further. March 1st, 1935, 10:17 in the morning. Spring came early that year. Snow began melting in late February. By March, hillsides were showing patches of brown and green. Birds returned, streams thawed. The world began breathing again. Eleanor stood on her porch, hope in her arms, watching the hollow come back to life. 17 structures now. 17 families who had built their own versions of the Callahan method. 17 households who would face next winter with dry firewood and warm cabins. And that was just Bitter Creek Hollow. "You did this," Samuel said, coming up the hill. "All of this, because you were too stubborn to give up." "We did this. I just showed how." Don't make yourself small. What you built, what you taught, what you survived, that's extraordinary. Eleanor looked at Hope. "I don't feel extraordinary. I feel tired." "That's how you know you're doing something important." Samuel sat down beside her. "Easy things don't make you tired. Things that matter do." March 15th, 1935. 3:38 in the afternoon. The ceremony was Mary's idea. "You can't let this pass without marking it," she insisted. 3 months since the storm. 3 months since Hope was born. The hollow needs to celebrate. So Eleanor agreed. They gathered on the hillside, Nearly 50 people from Bitter Creek and surrounding areas. Families who had built structures. Families who were planning to build. Families who had heard about the Callahan method and wanted to meet the woman behind it. Samuel spoke first. 3 months ago, this hollow was dying. We didn't know it, but we were. Doing things the way our granddaddies did. Freezing in cabins that leaked heat. Losing children to sicknesses that shouldn't have been fatal. He gestured at Eleanor. This woman changed that. Not with money or power. With knowledge. With stubbornness. With a refusal to accept that the old way was the only way. He turned to face the crowd. Some of us laughed at her. Some called her crazy. Some did worse. We know who we are. His voice wavered. But she forgave us. Not because we deserved it, but because she understood that holding on to anger doesn't build anything. He raised a cup of cider. To Eleanor Callahan. To hope. To the future we're building together. To Eleanor, the crowd echoed. To hope. To the future. March 27, 1935. 9:04 in the morning. The request came by mail. Eleanor recognized the official seal before she opened it. State Government, Department of Agriculture. Dear Mrs. Callahan, it read. The West Virginia Agricultural Extension Service has received numerous inquiries about your firewood storage method. We are organizing a regional conference in Charleston next month to train county agents and community leaders. We would be honored if you would attend as our keynote speaker. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Her. A keynote speaker. At a regional conference. She laughed out loud. What's funny? Mary asked. They want me to give a speech in Charleston at a conference. Mary's face lit up. That's wonderful. You're going to do it, aren't you? I can't. I have hope. I have responsibilities. Can't just what? Can't share your knowledge with people who need it? Mary put her hands on her hips. I'll watch Hope. Samuel will watch Hope. The whole hollow will watch Hope. You're going to that conference. But, no buts. This is bigger than you now. Eleanor looked at the letter. Fine, but you're coming with me. Mary's jaw dropped. Me in Charleston. I'm not doing this alone. April 2nd, 1935, 6:15 in the morning. The morning Eleanor left for Charleston, the whole hollow came to see her off. Samuel had arranged a wagon to the train station. Mary was already inside fussing over luggage and chattering about city food. Hope was in Eleanor's arms, wide awake. You be good for Mrs. Henderson, Eleanor whispered. Mama will be back soon. Hope grabbed a fistful of hair and pulled. I'll take that as agreement. She handed the baby to Sarah Henderson, who had volunteered to help care for Hope. Anything she needs, anything at all, send word. She'll be fine, I promise. Eleanor climbed onto the wagon. Ready? Samuel asked. She looked at her cabin, at the structure, at the community she'd helped transform. Ready. The wagon lurched forward. Eleanor didn't look back. April 5th, 1935. 2:07 in the afternoon. The conference hall in Charleston was larger than anything Eleanor had ever seen. Rows of chairs stretched from stage to back wall, every seat filled. Farmers, extension agents, community leaders. A banner hung above the stage, West Virginia Agricultural Extension Service. Spring Conference, 1935. Eleanor stood backstage, hands trembling. I can't do this, she whispered to Mary. I can't stand up there. Yes, you can. Mary grabbed her hands. You survived a blizzard, gave birth alone, faced down Silas Crawford. A speech is nothing. A speech is different. Eleanor, Mary's voice was firm. You know more about this than anyone in that room. All you have to do is tell them what you told me, what you told Samuel, what you told everyone who came up that hill. From the stage, Eleanor heard her name announced. Mary squeezed her hands. Go. Make your father proud. Eleanor walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding, the faces blurred, The applause overwhelming. She stepped up to the podium and thought of Hope, of Thomas, of her father, of everyone who had believed in her. She opened her mouth. My father was a shipbuilder. He taught me that wood's enemy isn't fire or time, it's moisture. Trap moisture inside a hull, and the strongest ship will rot. But let it breathe, let air move, and that ship will sail for 50 years. Her voice grew stronger. I didn't build my structure because I was smart. I built it because I was desperate. A pregnant widow with no money, no help, and a winter coming that everyone said would kill me. She looked out at the crowd. But here's what I learned. Sometimes having no choice is the best thing. Because when you can't do things the easy way, you have to find a better way. The room was silent. Every eye fixed on her. I'm not here to tell you I'm special. I'm not. I'm a mother who wanted her daughter to survive. But the method I use, the principles my father taught me, those are special. They can save your families the way they saved mine. She took a deep breath. Let me teach you what I know. April 5th, 3:47 in the afternoon. The applause went on for nearly 3 minutes. Eleanor stood at the podium, watching strangers rise to their feet. Men in worn overalls, women in patched dresses, extension agents in uniforms, all of them clapping. Robert Whitmore, the field agent who'd organized the conference, appeared beside her. That was the best speech I've heard in 20 years. I just told the truth. That's what made it good. The next 3 hours passed in a blur. A farmer from Mingo County wanted to know about roof angles. A county agent from Greenbrier had questions about humidity. A woman from Pocahontas County grabbed Eleanor's hands and wouldn't let go, crying that she'd lost 2 children to winter fever. Eleanor held that woman for a long time. It's not your fault. You did the best you could with what you knew. But now I know better. Yes. Now you can do better. April 7th, 1935. 2:14 in the afternoon. The train pulled into Beckley Station, and Eleanor saw them through the window. Dozens of people, maybe 50, standing on the platform with signs and banners. Welcome home. Eleanor Bitter Creek is proud of you. The Callahan method saves lives. Oh my God, Eleanor whispered. I told you. Mary was grinning. I told you. The door opened. Eleanor stepped onto the platform. The cheer was deafening. Samuel pushed through the crowd with Hope in his arms. The baby was awake, fists waving. Eleanor took her daughter and held her close. I missed you, she whispered. So much. Hope grabbed her hair and pulled. I missed you too. April 23rd, 1935, 8:14 in the morning. The first agricultural bulletin arrived 3 weeks later. Samuel brought it up the hill, hands trembling. Look at this, the front page. Eleanor took the bulletin. Callahan method, revolutionary firewood storage system, developed by West Virginia widow. Below the headline was a detailed diagram, measurements, angles, principles, everything she'd taught Robert Whitmore. They named it after you, Samuel said. The Callahan method, that's what they're calling it. Eleanor couldn't speak. Your daddy would be proud, Samuel said quietly. So damn proud. Eleanor nodded, blinking back tears. Yeah, I think he would be. May 15th, 1935. 11:33 in the morning. The letters kept coming, not dozens now, hundreds, from every state in Appalachia and beyond. Some asked questions, some asked for advice, some just wanted to say thank you. And with each letter, Eleanor answered, the Callahan method spread further. June 1st, 1935, 10:08 in the morning. Hope was 6 months old when Eleanor got the letter from the governor. She read it twice, certain she'd misunderstood. Dear Mrs. Callahan, it read, on behalf of the state of West Virginia, I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected to receive this year's Governor's Award for Agricultural Innovation. Eleanor stared at the paper. They want to give me an award, she told Mary. From the governor. Of course they do. You deserve it. I built a shed around my house. You changed how people think about building. You saved lives. You started something that's going to help families for generations. Mary took her hands. Accept the award, Eleanor. You've earned it. June 15th, 1935. 2:33 in the afternoon. The ceremony was held in Charleston. Eleanor stood on a stage while the governor himself pinned a medal to her dress and shook her hand. Mrs. Callahan, he said, you represent everything great about West Virginia. Determination, innovation, community spirit. On behalf of our state, thank you. The applause was thunderous. Eleanor looked out at the crowd, at the faces of strangers who had come to honor her. She thought about Thomas, about her father, about Samuel and Mary, and everyone who had believed in her. She thought about the pregnant widow who had picked up a hammer when everyone told her to stop. And she thought about Hope sleeping in Mary's arms in the front row. Thank you, she said into the microphone. But I didn't do this alone. Nobody does anything alone. I had help. I had teachers. I had people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. She paused. That's the real lesson, not the method, not the measurements. The lesson is that when we help each other, when we share what we know, when we refuse to let each other fail, there's nothing we can't survive. The applause started again. Eleanor stepped back from the microphone. She had said what needed to be said. Now there was work to do. July 4th, 1935. 12:08 in the afternoon. Independence Day brought the whole hollow together for the biggest celebration anyone could remember. Tables were set up in the field behind the church. Children ran through the grass waving sparklers. Old men sat in shade telling stories about wars and winters past. And at the center of it all, Eleanor sat with Hope on her lap, watching her community celebrate. 6 months since the storm. 6 months since she'd given birth alone in a blizzard. 6 months since everything changed. Samuel sat down next to her with a plate of fried chicken. You look like you're thinking hard about something. I got a letter yesterday, from Washington. Samuel's eyebrows rose. Washington, the Rural Electrification Administration. They want me to work for them, helping bring electricity to rural communities. That's a big job. Too big, I can't leave. Eleanor looked at Hope. This is where her father's buried, where she was born. How can I take her away from that? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Your daddy. He stayed in the same place his whole life. No, he moved from Norway to Maryland when he was 17. And he did okay? Better than okay. Became the best shipbuilder on the Chesapeake. Because he took what he knew and brought it somewhere new. Samuel looked at her. Maybe that's what you need to do too. But this is home. Home is where Hope is. Home is where you are. Samuel took her hand. You've done more in 6 months than most people do in a lifetime. If this job can help you help more people, maybe you should take it. Eleanor looked at her daughter, at her community, at the life she'd built from nothing. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. July 20th, 1935, 9:15 in the morning, she said no. The letter went out on a Monday, polite but firm. Thank you for the opportunity, but I have responsibilities here. My daughter is young. My community needs me, perhaps in a few years. The response came a week later. Dear Mrs. Callahan, we understand your concerns and respect your decision. However, we want you to know that the offer remains open. When you're ready, we'll be here. The work we're doing matters, and we believe you could make a significant contribution. Eleanor filed the letter away and went back to her life. But something had shifted. A door had opened, and even though she hadn't walked through it, she knew it was there. August 15th, 1935. 3:22 in the afternoon. Summer brought more visitors to Bitter Creek Hollow than anyone could remember. Farmers from 3 states came to see the Callahan method in action. Extension agents came to take measurements and photographs. A professor from the state university came to study the physics of air circulation. This is remarkable, the professor said, running his hands along the boards. You've independently rediscovered principles that modern engineers are only beginning to understand. I didn't discover anything. I just paid attention to what my father taught me. That's how all the best discoveries happen. The professor smiled. Someone pays attention when everyone else is too busy doing things the way they've always been done. He pulled out a card. I'd like to write about your method for an engineering journal. Would you be willing to be interviewed? Eleanor looked at the card. Professor Harold Mitchell, Department of Structural Engineering. I suppose, but I'm not an engineer. Mrs. Callahan, with respect, you're more of an engineer than half my colleagues. They have degrees. You have results. I know which one matters more. September 3rd, 1935, 10:33 in the morning. The engineering article was published in October. Eleanor didn't understand half the technical language, but she understood the conclusion the Callahan method was sound, scientifically proven, worthy of widespread adoption. Letters poured in from places she'd never heard of, universities requesting permission to study the method, companies wanting to manufacture pre-built components, government agencies asking for consultation. You're famous, Mary said, sorting through the mail. Actually famous, not just Charleston famous. The whole country knows your name. I didn't ask for this. Nobody asks for it. But you've got it. The question is, what you're going to do with it. Eleanor looked at the pile of letters, at the opportunities, at the responsibilities. I'm going to answer every single one, and I'm going to make sure they all get it right. September 20th, 1935, 7:15 in the evening. Hope took her first steps on a cool autumn evening. Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard Mary gasp from the main room. Eleanor, come quick! She ran in to find Hope standing in the middle of the floor, wobbling but upright, her tiny face scrunched in concentration. She just stood up, Mary whispered. On her own. Hope took one step, then another, then a third before her legs gave out and she sat down hard on her bottom. She looked up at Eleanor with surprise. Then she laughed. Eleanor scooped her up, tears streaming down her face. You did it! You walked! Hope grabbed her mother's face with both hands and squeezed. That's my girl. That's my brave, stubborn girl. Mary was crying too. Thomas would have loved to see this. He did see it. Eleanor kissed Hope's forehead. Somehow, I know he did. October 15th, 1935. 2:14 in the afternoon. The first challenge to the Callahan method came from an unexpected source. A letter arrived from a building contractor in Wheeling. Formal, official, threatening. Dear Mrs. Callahan, it read, it has come to our attention that you have been promoting construction techniques without proper certification or licensing. Your so-called method has not been approved by any recognized building authority. We are advising homeowners in our region to disregard your recommendations and consult with licensed professionals. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. They're trying to stop you, Samuel said when she showed him. Scared you're cutting into their business. How can teaching people to build something be bad for business? Because if people can do it themselves, they don't need to hire contractors. Samuel spat on the ground. Money. It always comes down to money. What do I do? You fight. Same as always. October 20th, 1935, 9:33 in the morning. Eleanor's response was published in 3 newspapers. To the contractors of Wheeling and elsewhere, I have no certification. I have no license. What I have is a daughter who is alive because I built something that worked when everything else failed. You say my method hasn't been approved by any recognized authority. I say it's been approved by every family that used it to survive last winter. Every child who stayed warm. Every mother who didn't have to bury her baby in frozen ground. You want people to consult with licensed professionals. Fine. But ask those professionals how many of them have given birth alone in a blizzard. How many have built something with their own hands while 8 months pregnant? How many have bet their lives on their own work and won? I'm not selling anything. I'm not competing with anyone. I'm sharing knowledge that saves lives. If that threatens your business, maybe your business needs threatening. The letter sparked a firestorm. Newspapers across the region picked up the story. The wheeling contractors backed down within a week, and the Callahan method became even more famous than before. November 2nd, 1935, 4:15 in the afternoon. The second letter from Washington arrived on a gray afternoon. Dear Mrs. Callahan, it read, "We've been following your work with great interest. Your handling of the wheeling situation demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership we're looking for. The offer remains open, and we're prepared to sweeten it. We can offer you a position as Regional Community Liaison for the Rural Electrification Administration. You would work from Charleston close to home, traveling only as needed. Your daughter could come with you. We would provide housing assistance and a salary that would allow you to support your family comfortably. Please consider it. The work we're doing matters, and we need people like you." Eleanor read the letter to Mary that evening. "You're going to say no again, aren't you?" "I don't know." Mary looked up sharply. "You don't know. Hope is almost a year old now. She's walking, talking, growing up so fast." Eleanor looked at the letter. "What kind of world am I preparing her for? One where I stayed safe and small, or one where I took risks and tried to make a difference? You've already made a difference. I've made a start. But there's so much more to do." Eleanor met Mary's eyes. "What would you do?" Mary was quiet for a long moment. "I'd take the job. I'd take it because opportunities like this don't come twice. I'd take it because you have gifts that shouldn't be wasted. And I'd take it because your daughter is watching everything you do, every choice you make, every time you play it safe or take a chance." She paused. "What do you want her to learn?" November 15th, 1935, 10:08 in the morning. Eleanor said yes. The letter went out on a Monday. Formal, but warm. "I accept your offer. I have conditions which I've listed below. If these are acceptable, I can begin in January." The response came within days. "All conditions accepted. Welcome to the Rural Electrification Administration. We look forward to working with you." Eleanor sat in her cabin holding the letter, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She was leaving Bitter Creek Hollow. She was taking Hope to Charleston. She was starting a new chapter in a life that had already had too many chapters. "Scared?" Samuel asked. "Terrified." "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You're going to do great things, Eleanor Callahan. Greater things than any of us can imagine." December 17th, 1935. 8:44 in the morning. 1 year since the storm. Eleanor woke in her cabin and lay in bed listening to Hope babble in the next room. 1 year since she'd given birth alone. 1 year since she'd built a structure that changed everything. She got up and went to Hope's room. The baby was standing in her crib, bouncing with excitement. "Mama!" "Good morning, birthday girl." She picked Hope up and held her close. 1 year old. Can you believe it? You survived a blizzard and a birth and everything in between. Hope grabbed Eleanor's face and squeezed. "That's right. You're a survivor. Just like your mama." December 17th, 7:03 in the evening. The birthday party was small but perfect. Samuel was there. Mary, the Hendersons, the Perkins family. Everyone who had helped Eleanor survive gathered to celebrate the miracle baby who had turned 1 year old. Hope was passed from arm to arm, laughing and babbling, completely unaware of what her birthday meant. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Jacob Perkins said. "Feels like yesterday we were all freezing in that church." "Feels like a lifetime ago," Martha added. "So much has changed." "So much is going to change," Eleanor said. "I'm leaving in January, taking the job in Charleston." The room went quiet. "We know," Samuel said softly. "We've known for weeks. And we're proud of you." He raised his cup. "To Eleanor Callahan, the woman who saved us all and is going to save a whole lot more." To Eleanor. The room echoed. January 5th, 1936, 6:44 in the morning. The morning Eleanor left Bitter Creek Hollow, the whole community came to say goodbye. Samuel was there looking older than she remembered. Mary was crying openly. The Hendersons, the Perkins family, even Ruth Crawford, stood at the edge of the crowd. And Silas. He approached her last hat in his hands. "I heard you're leaving." "I am." "Good." He said it without malice. "You were always too big for this place. I knew it when we were children. I hated it then. I don't anymore." "What changed?" "You did. Watching you change made me realize maybe I could too." He met her eyes. "I'm not the man I was. I'm trying to be better." "That's all anyone can do." He nodded once. "Goodbye, Eleanor. And thank you. For everything." Eleanor climbed into the wagon. Hope was in her arms, wide-eyed. "Ready?" Samuel asked. She looked at her cabin, at the structure, at the community she'd transformed. "Ready." The wagon lurched forward. Eleanor didn't look back. February 3rd, 1936, 10:33 in the morning. Charleston was another world. The Rural Electrification Administration offices were in a building that seemed to stretch toward the sky. Men in suits, women in smart dresses, typewriters clicking, phones ringing. Eleanor's office was small but clean, with a window overlooking a street busier than any road in West Virginia. Hope was with a nursemaid Eleanor had hired, a kind widow named Clara who reminded her of Mary. Her first assignment came on her third day. "There's a community in southwestern Virginia," her supervisor said. "Applewood Hollow, 300 families. They've been fighting against power lines for months. They don't trust the government, don't trust electricity, don't trust anything from outside." "What do you want me to do?" "Talk to them, listen to them, figure out what they're afraid of." "I'm not a salesperson." "No, you're someone who understands what it's like to be dismissed, to be told your ideas are crazy, to have to fight for everything." Her supervisor smiled. "That's exactly what these people need." February 10th, 1936, 7:22 in the morning. Applewood Hollow could have been Bitter Creek's twin. The same winding mountain roads, the same small cabins, the same suspicious faces watching as the government car pulled up. Eleanor got out alone. She'd insisted on that. "Who are you?" An old man sat on the store's porch whittling. "Eleanor Callahan, Rural Electrification Administration." "Government?" "I'm from a hollow just like this one, 200 miles east. My husband was a miner, died in a cave-in. I gave birth alone in a blizzard." She met his eyes. "6 months ago, I was as suspicious of government people as you are." The old man stopped whittling. "What changed?" "I learned that sometimes the government actually wants to help, and sometimes help means progress that scares us at first, but makes our lives better." "What's that got to do with electricity?" "Everything. Can I tell you a story?" The old man studied her. "Take a seat. I got time." February 10th, 3:47 in the afternoon. She told them about the Callahan method. Not to brag, but to show them she understood what it meant to face something new and frightening. To have everyone tell you change was dangerous. To try anyway. By afternoon's end, a crowd had gathered. 30 people, maybe 40. All listening to a widow from West Virginia explain why they shouldn't fear power lines. "Electricity isn't going to destroy your way of life," she said. "It's going to make it easier. Lights that don't need kerosene. Pumps that bring water without hauling." "What if we don't want that?" someone called. "Then don't use it. That's the beauty. Electricity gives you options. It doesn't force you to change who you are." An old woman near the front spoke up. "My grandson got the fever last winter. Couldn't keep the cabin warm enough. Doctor said if we'd had electric heat, he might have pulled through." Her voice broke. "He didn't pull through." Eleanor's heart clenched. "I'm sorry. I lost people too. But we can make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. That's what progress means. Not forgetting the past. Learning from it. The crowd was silent. Then the old woman nodded. Tell us more about these power lines. March 15, 1936. 2:14 in the afternoon. Applewood Hollow voted to accept electrification. Not unanimously. Nothing ever was. But by a wide enough margin that the project could move forward. Eleanor stayed for 2 more days, answering questions, helping families understand what to expect. On her last night, the old woman brought her a jar of honey. Thank you for not treating us like we're stupid just because we're scared. You're not stupid. Fear is natural. Fear kept me from trying new things my whole life. The woman looked at the honey. Maybe it's time to stop being so afraid. Maybe it is. April 2nd, 1936. 9:15 in the morning. The pattern repeated across the region. Communities that had agreed to electrification got cold feet. Preachers stirred up fear. Rumors spread about accidents and mysterious illnesses. Every time Eleanor went herself. Every time she listened first and talked second. Every time she told her story. It worked more often than it failed. By April, the project was ahead of schedule. 30 communities electrified, 20 more in progress. You're remarkable, her supervisor said. Other regions average 60% adoption. You're at 87. I just talk to people. You do more than talk. You connect. She paused. Have you ever thought about politics? Eleanor laughed. I'm a widow from West Virginia with a second-grade education. You'd be surprised. People vote for authenticity. I'll stick to electricity, thanks. But the idea planted itself and wouldn't go away. June 15th, 1936. 7:03 in the morning. Hope's first word was light. She said it while pointing at the electric lamp in their Charleston apartment. Eleanor laughed until she cried. That's right, baby girl. Light. Hope clapped her hands and said it again. Light, light, light. Eleanor picked her up and held her close. You're going to grow up in a world with electricity everywhere. You won't remember what it was like before. Won't remember kerosene lamps and cold cabins and the fear of winter. Hope grabbed her face. And that's okay. That's what progress means. Making things better for the next generation. September 20th, 1936. 8:22 in the evening. The telegram came from Bitter Creek Hollow. Samuel, seriously ill. Doctor says come quickly. Eleanor was on a train within the hour. She left Hope with Clara, promising to call as soon as she knew anything. Rode through the night watching mountains pass in darkness. Not Samuel. Please not Samuel. She couldn't lose him too. September 21st, 7:22 in the morning. She made it in time. Samuel was in bed, pale and thin. But he was alive, and when he saw Eleanor in the doorway, he smiled. You came. Of course I came. She sat on the bed's edge and took his hand. You scared me. Takes more than a bad heart to kill me. He coughed, though this time it came close. What happened? I'm 76 years old, Eleanor. Things wear out. He squeezed her hand. But I needed to see you, to tell you something. What? I'm proud of you. Always have been, but I never said it properly, face to face. You've said it 100 times. Not enough. He pulled her closer. Look at me. Eleanor looked. You are the bravest woman I've ever known. Everything you've accomplished, everything you've become. It's because you refuse to give up. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Yes, you could. You would have found another way. That's who you are. He smiled. But I'm glad I got to help. September 30th, 1936. 4:33 in the afternoon. Samuel recovered. Slowly, carefully, but he recovered. Eleanor stayed for 2 weeks working remotely when she could, delegating when she couldn't. On her last day, she walked up the hill to her old cabin. The structure was still standing. Someone had painted it green to match the forest. A small sign hung over the entrance, Callahan Method Demonstration Site. "We get visitors sometimes," Sarah Henderson explained. "People who read about you, want to see where it started. My daddy gives tours." Eleanor walked through the structure, running her hands along boards she'd nailed 3 years ago. The wood was weathered, but solid, built to last. "How long do you think it will stand?" 50 years at least, maybe longer." "That's a long time." "That's the point. Building something that outlasts you." December 17, 1936. 8:04 in the morning. 2 years since the storm. Eleanor woke in her Charleston apartment with Hope beside her. The girl had had a nightmare and crawled in during the night. 2 years since she'd given birth alone. 2 years since Thomas had been dead. "Mama," Hope's voice was sleepy. "I'm here, baby." "Why are you crying?" Eleanor touched her cheek. She hadn't realized she was. "I'm thinking about your daddy." "Daddy's in heaven." "That's right." "Do they have electricity in heaven?" Eleanor laughed. "I don't know. Maybe." "I think they do." Hope snuggled closer. "Because electricity is good, and heaven is good. That's very logical." "What's logical mean?" "It means you're smart, just like your daddy." March 4th, 1937, 2:33 in the afternoon. The telegram came from Bitter Creek Hollow again. "Samuel passed peacefully last night. Funeral Saturday." Eleanor was on a train within the hour. This time she brought Hope. March 6th, 1937, 11:17 in the morning. The whole hollow came to the funeral. More people than Eleanor had seen at any gathering. From neighboring hollows, from distant counties. All with stories about Samuel. How he'd helped them. How he'd listened. How he'd been there when they needed someone. Eleanor stood at the graveside with Hope in her arms, watching them lower Samuel into the ground. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." The wind carried her words away. March 6th, 3:44 in the afternoon. After the funeral, Mary found her at the cabin. The structure was still standing. Someone had been maintaining it, keeping wood stacked, clearing vents. "Samuel," Mary said. "He came up here every week. Said he was keeping it ready in case you came home." Eleanor's throat tightened. "He knew I wasn't coming back." "He hoped you would. That's different." They sat in silence watching the sun set. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "To the hollow. We figure it out, same as we figured out everything else." Mary took her hand. "That's what you taught us. We keep going." "I taught you that. You taught us everything." June 1st, 1937, 10:08 in the morning. Hope was 2.5 when Eleanor got the letter from the governor. She read it twice, certain she'd misunderstood. "Dear Mrs. Callahan," it read, "I am writing to offer you a position on the State Commission for Rural Development. Your work with the Rural Electrification Administration has demonstrated exceptional leadership. We believe you could make an even greater contribution at the state level." Eleanor stared at the paper. "They want me on a state commission," she told Mary on the phone. "As chairwoman." "Of course they do. You've earned it." "I'm not a politician." "You're a leader. That's better than a politician." "What about Hope?" "Hope will be fine. She's got you. That's all she needs." July 4th, 1937, 3:33 in the afternoon. She said yes. The announcement came during the Independence Day celebration in Charleston. Governor Kump introduced Eleanor Callahan as the new chairwoman of the State Commission on Rural Development. The applause was deafening. Hope stood beside her, holding her hand. "Why are they clapping, Mama?" "Because they think I can help them." "Can you?" Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'm going to try." September 19th, 1937, 8:22 in the evening. The first year was the hardest of her life. Politics was nothing like community organizing. Budgets and committees and endless meetings where men talked over her and dismissed her ideas. She fought every battle. She won most of them. By September, the commission had approved funding for 15 electrification projects, 12 road improvements, and a statewide program to teach the Callahan method. "You're making enemies," a colleague warned. "Powerful enemies." "Good. Enemies mean I'm doing something worth fighting against." "You could lose everything." "I've lost everything before. I survived." December 17th, 1937. 6:44 in the morning. 3 years since the storm. Eleanor woke to find Hope standing beside her bed holding a wrapped package. "Happy anniversary, Mama." "Anniversary?" "The day I was born. You told me the story." Eleanor sat up, throat tight. "You remembered." "I always remember." Hope climbed onto the bed. "I made you something." Eleanor unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a crayon drawing. A cabin inside a structure. A woman holding a baby. Snow falling. "That's us," Hope said. "In the storm." Eleanor couldn't speak. She pulled her daughter close. "Are you sad, Mama?" "No, baby. I'm the opposite of sad." "What's that?" "Grateful." March 15th, 1938. 2:14 in the afternoon. The invitation came from Minnesota. The Historical Society was dedicating an exhibit on frontier building techniques. The centerpiece would be the Callahan method. They wanted Eleanor to speak at the opening. "Minnesota," she said to Clara. "Where it all started." "Where what started?" "The Norwegian immigrants, the shed houses. My father read about them in a maritime journal." Eleanor smiled. "I just adapted their principles." "So you're going?" "I'm going to Minnesota." April 2nd, 1938, 10:33 in the morning. The exhibit was housed in a restored frontier cabin. Eleanor walked through slowly, Hope's hand in hers, reading plaques and studying photographs. "Look, Mama." Hope pointed at a display. "That man built a shed too." Eleanor looked. The photograph showed a weathered cabin surrounded by an outer shell, almost identical to hers. The plaque read, "Olaf Henriksson, Norwegian immigrant, Pine Ridge Settlement, 1888. "He did it first," Eleanor said softly. 50 years before I did." "But you didn't know about him." "No, I learned from my father who learned from articles about Scandinavian shipbuilding." "So you're both important." Eleanor looked at the photograph. This Norwegian immigrant who'd faced the same ridicule, built the same structure, proved the same point. "Yes, we're both important, and so are all the people who'll use these ideas after us." "Will I add something new?" Eleanor knelt to look her daughter in the eye. "You'll add something extraordinary, I know it." "How do you know?" "Because you're a Callahan, and Callahan women change the world." April 2nd, 1938, 3:47 in the afternoon. The speech at the Minnesota Historical Society went better than Eleanor expected. She stood before 500 people and told her story one more time. The storm, the birth, the structure, the method. But this time, she added something new. "I used to think I invented something," she said. "I was proud of that. Proud that I'd figured out a better way when everyone around me was doing things wrong." She paused. "But I didn't invent anything. I rediscovered something that people like Olaf Henriksson knew 50 years before I was born. Something Norwegian shipbuilders knew centuries before that. The knowledge was always there. I just found it when I needed it most." The crowd was silent. "That's what I want you to take from my story. Not that I'm special, but that knowledge is everywhere waiting to be found. In old books, in forgotten journals, in the wisdom of people we've dismissed as primitive." She looked at Hope in the front row. "The Callahan method isn't really mine. It belongs to everyone who ever figured out that air and moisture and wood have relationships that can be understood. It belongs to everyone who'll use these principles in the future." She smiled. I'm just the one who gave it a name. May 15th, 1938, 9:22 in the morning. The letter from Robert Henriksen arrived 3 weeks later. Eleanor read it twice, her hands trembling. Dear Mrs. Callahan, it began. My name is Robert Henriksen. I am the great-grandson of Olaf Henriksen, whose photograph you saw at the Minnesota exhibit. I've recently discovered your story, and I wanted to reach out. My great-grandfather died believing his invention would be forgotten. He spent years trying to convince people that double-shell construction was the future. Nobody listened. By the time he passed in 1924, he thought he'd failed. But he didn't fail. Because somehow, across 50 years and 1,000 miles, his ideas reached you. And you did what he couldn't. You made people listen. I don't know how knowledge travels. I don't understand how ideas jump from one mind to another across time and space. But I believe there's a connection between my great-grandfather and you. A thread running through history. Thank you for carrying that thread forward. Thank you for proving his work mattered. Eleanor sat at her desk and wrote back immediately. Dear Mr. Henriksen, she began, your great-grandfather didn't fail. He planted a seed. Seeds don't always grow where you plant them. Sometimes they travel on the wind. Sometimes they wait underground for decades before finding the right conditions. I never met Olaf Henriksen, but I carry part of him with me every day. In the structure I built, in the method that bears my name but belongs to everyone. We are all threads in the same tapestry. Your great-grandfather, my father, me, you, everyone who ever understood something important and tried to share it. The thread continues. That's all that matters. June 1st, 1938, 10:08 in the morning. Hope was 3.5 when Eleanor received the invitation that would change everything again. The National Conference on Rural Development, Washington, D.C., 3,000 attendees from every state in the nation, and they wanted Eleanor Callahan to deliver the keynote address. Washington, she said to Clara, the actual capital. You've earned it. I'm a widow from West Virginia. You're the most famous agricultural innovator in the country. Clara smiled. Own it, Eleanor. You've earned every bit of it. June 15th, 1938, 2:33 in the afternoon. The conference hall was the largest Eleanor had ever seen. 3,000 people, farmers, scientists, politicians, government officials, all of them waiting to hear from her. She stood backstage, her hands shaking. Hope was with Clara in the front row. 4 years old now, already asking questions about everything, already showing signs of the stubborn determination that had kept Eleanor alive. You can do this, Eleanor whispered to herself. You've done harder things. She walked onto the stage. The applause started before she reached the podium. Thank you, she said when it finally died down. Thank you all for being here. But I have to be honest with you, I don't belong here. The crowd murmured. I don't have a degree. I don't have formal training. I don't have any of the credentials that usually get someone invited to speak at a conference like this. She paused. What I have is a daughter who is alive because I refused to give up. What I have is a community that survived because I was too stubborn to die. What I have is knowledge that was passed down from my father, who learned it from sailors who learned it from their fathers before them. She looked out at the sea of faces. That's what I want to talk about today. Not innovation, not progress, not policy. I want to talk about the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about the way knowledge travels through generations, across oceans, through time itself. She told them about her father, about the Chesapeake shipbuilders, about Olaf Henriksen in Minnesota, about the thread that connected them all. The Callahan method works, she said. The science proves it. The results prove it. But the reason it works isn't because I'm special. It's because I paid attention. I listened to what my father taught me. I observed what was happening around me. And when everyone told me I was wrong, I trusted what I knew. Her voice grew stronger. That's what I want you to take from this. Not my method, not my story. The understanding that every single one of you has knowledge that matters. Every single one of you has something to teach. The question is whether you have the courage to share it. The applause lasted for 5 minutes. September 3rd, 1938. 7:15 in the evening. The job offers started coming after the Washington speech. Universities wanted her to teach. Companies wanted her to consult. Government agencies wanted her to lead. Eleanor turned them all down. Why? Clara asked. You could make a fortune. Because money isn't what I'm after. Eleanor looked at Hope playing on the floor with wooden blocks. I want to change things. You can't change things from inside a corporation. You can't change things by getting comfortable. So what are you going to do? I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, traveling, teaching, helping communities one at a time. She smiled. It's slower, but it's real. December 17th, 1938, 6:44 in the morning, 4 years since the storm. Eleanor woke to find Hope standing beside her bed, holding another wrapped package. Happy anniversary, Mama. You remembered again. I always remember. Hope climbed onto the bed. I made you something new this year. Eleanor unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a drawing more detailed than last year's. The cabin, the structure, the snow. But this time there were more figures. Samuel, Mary, the neighbors who had helped. That's everyone, Hope said. Everyone who helped us. Eleanor's throat tightened. It's beautiful, baby. Do you like it? I love it. She pulled Hope close. I love it more than anything. March 15th, 1939. 2:14 in the afternoon. The news came from Germany. War was coming. Everyone could feel it. The newspapers were full of stories about Hitler and invasions and the gathering storm in Europe. Eleanor sat in her Charleston apartment, reading the headlines, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. What's war? Hope asked, looking at the newspaper. It's when countries fight each other. Why do they fight? Because some people want to take things that don't belong to them. Because some people think they're better than others. Because some people would rather destroy than build. Hope was quiet for a moment. That's sad. Yes, baby, it is. Will there be a war here? Eleanor looked at her daughter, 4 years old, innocent, unaware of the darkness gathering across the ocean. I don't know, but whatever happens, I'll protect you. I promise. Hope nodded solemnly. I know you will, Mama. You always do. September 1st, 1939. 8:33 in the morning. Germany invaded Poland. The world changed overnight. Eleanor watched the news reports with growing dread. The war that everyone had feared was now reality, and America, despite its distance, would not stay untouched forever. What do we do? Clara asked. We prepare, same as always. Eleanor looked at the window. We build, we strengthen, we make sure that whatever comes, we're ready. How do you prepare for war? The same way you prepare for winter. You gather resources. You build shelter. You take care of your community. She paused. And you pray that it's enough. December 17th, 1939. 7:03 in the morning, 5 years since the storm. Hope was 5 years old now, starting school, learning to read and write, already showing signs of the intelligence that had kept Eleanor alive. Tell me the story again, Hope said at breakfast. About the night I was born. Eleanor had told this story dozens of times, but she told it again because Hope loved hearing it, and because some stories needed to be repeated. It was the worst storm anyone could remember. The wind was so loud you couldn't hear yourself think, and I was alone in a cabin on a hillside. She told the whole story. The building, the ridicule, the sabotage, the storm, the birth. When she finished, Hope was quiet. Were you scared? Terrified? But you did it anyway. Yes. Why? Eleanor looked at her daughter, 5 years old, already asking the questions that mattered. Because I had to. Because giving up wasn't an option. Because I had you to think about. Hope nodded slowly. I want to be like you when I grow up. You'll be better. You'll have advantages I never had. Education, opportunities, a world that's changing. But I want to be brave like you. Eleanor pulled her daughter close. You already are, baby. You already are. June 15, 1940, 2:33 in the afternoon. Hope graduated from kindergarten on a warm June day. Eleanor sat in the audience watching her daughter walk across the small stage to receive her certificate. 5 years old, already accomplished, already reaching for more. After the ceremony, Hope ran to Eleanor and threw her arms around her. I did it, Mama. You did it. Eleanor held her tight. I'm so proud of you. Now I get to learn real things. Reading, writing, numbers. You're going to learn everything. Hope pulled back and looked at her mother with serious eyes. And then I'm going to help people, like you do. Eleanor's heart swelled. That's exactly what you're going to do. December 7th, 1941. 1:17 in the afternoon. The radio announcement came on a Sunday afternoon. Eleanor was in the kitchen making lunch when she heard the words that changed everything. We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air. President Roosevelt has just announced. She stood, frozen wooden spoon in hand, listening to the impossible become real. America was at war. December 8th, 1941, 9:33 in the morning. The next months were a blur of change. Men left for the military. Women took their places in factories and farms. Rationing began. Everything was different. Eleanor threw herself into the war effort. She helped organize food drives. She taught families how to conserve fuel using the Callahan method. She did everything she could to support a nation at war. Hope, 7 years old now, watched and learned. Why are all the men leaving? She asked. Because our country needs them. Will they come back? Eleanor thought about Thomas, about the empty coffin she'd buried, about all the families who would face the same grief. Some will, some won't. She knelt to Hope's level. That's why we have to help however we can, to make sure their sacrifice means something. Hope nodded. I want to help too. You will, baby, when you're older. I want to help now. Eleanor looked at her daughter, 7 years old, already determined, already stubborn, already a Callahan. Then we'll find a way. March 15th, 1942, 2:14 in the afternoon. Hope's first contribution to the war effort was a letter. She wrote it herself in careful 7-year-old handwriting and sent it to a soldier overseas whose name she'd gotten from a church list. Dear soldier. The letter read, My name is Hope. I am 7 years old. My mama says you are fighting to keep us safe. Thank you. I hope you come home soon. Love, Hope Callahan. The soldier wrote back 3 weeks later. Dear Hope, his letter read, Thank you for your letter. It was the best thing I've received since I got here. Knowing that kids like you are back home safe and happy makes everything we're doing worth it. Stay brave, stay kind, and keep writing. Your letters make a difference. Your friend, Private James Mitchell. Hope wrote to him every week for the next 2 years. June 15th, 1944, 10:33 in the morning. D-Day came and went. The war was turning. Everyone could feel it. The news from Europe was finally hopeful after years of darkness. Eleanor sat in her apartment reading the newspapers, allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the end was in sight. Hope was 9 now, growing up fast, already asking questions about everything. Mama? Yes, baby. When the war is over, what happens? People come home. Families are reunited. We rebuild. And then, Eleanor smiled. And then we make sure it never happens again. We teach our children. We remember what war costs. We work for peace. Can we do that? We can try. That's all anyone can do. August 15th, 1945. 3:17 in the afternoon. The war ended on a Tuesday. Eleanor was in her office when she heard the shouting from the street. She ran to the window and saw people pouring out of buildings, embracing, crying, celebrating. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. She found Hope at school and pulled her out of class. They walked through the celebrating streets together, hand in hand, taking in the joy and relief that filled the air. "Is it really over?" Hope asked. "It's really over. Everyone can come home now." Eleanor thought about all the soldiers who wouldn't come home, all the families who would never be whole again, all the empty chairs at dinner tables across the country. Everyone who can will. She squeezed Hope's hand. "And we'll be here to welcome them." December 17th, 1945. 8:44 in the morning. 11 years since the storm. Eleanor woke in her Charleston apartment, 49 years old, feeling every year in her bones. Hope was beside her, having crawled into bed sometime during the night after a nightmare about the war. 11 years since she'd given birth alone. 11 years since Thomas had been dead. 11 years since everything changed. "Mama," Hope's voice was sleepy. "I'm here. I had a bad dream." "I know. The war's really over, right?" "It's really over." Hope snuggled closer. "I'm glad." "Me too, baby. Me too." June 15th, 1950. 2:33 in the afternoon. Hope graduated from high school at the top of her class. Eleanor sat in the audience, watching her daughter walk across the stage, accepting her diploma, giving the valedictorian speech she'd worked on for months. "We are the children of war," Hope said, her voice steady and strong. "We grew up with rationing and loss and fear. But we also grew up with hope, with the belief that tomorrow could be better than today." She looked out at the audience. "My mother taught me that. She taught me that survival isn't about being strong. It's about being stubborn. It's about refusing to give up even when everyone tells you to." Her eyes found Eleanor's. "Mama, everything I am is because of you. Because you picked up a hammer when everyone told you to stop. Because you built something when everyone said it was impossible. Because you believed in tomorrow when today was trying to kill you." She raised her diploma. "This is for you. For everything you sacrificed. For everything you taught me. For every day you got up and kept going when it would have been easier to stop." Eleanor was crying. She didn't try to hide it. "I love you, Mama, and I'm going to make you proud." The applause was deafening. September 3rd, 1950, 10:33 in the morning. Hope went to college. Not just any college. West Virginia University. The first woman from Bitter Creek Hollow to attend. The first in her family to pursue higher education. Eleanor drove her to campus, helped her unpack, and stood in the doorway of her dorm room, trying not to cry. "You'll be fine," Eleanor said. "I know. Call me every week." "I will. Study hard, make friends. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do." Hope smiled. "I learned from the best." They embraced for a long moment, mother and daughter, two Callahan women, both stubborn, both brave, both determined to change the world. "I love you, baby." "I love you too, Mama." Eleanor walked away. She didn't look back. If she looked back, she'd never leave. December 17th, 1950. 7:03 in the morning. 16 years since the storm. Eleanor woke alone in her Charleston apartment. Hope was at college. Clara had retired. The rooms felt emptier than they'd ever been. 16 years since she'd given birth alone. 16 years since she'd built a structure that changed everything. She got up and went to the window. The city was waking up below her. Cars and people and life going on as it always did. She thought about everything she'd accomplished. The method, the teaching, the lives saved, the communities transformed. And she thought about everything she'd lost. Thomas, Samuel, her youth, her innocence. Was it worth it? She looked at the photograph on her nightstand. Hope at graduation, smiling, confident, ready for the world. Yes, it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt and fear. It was all worth it. June 15, 1954, 2:33 in the afternoon. Hope graduated from college with honors, engineering degree. The first woman in West Virginia to earn one. Already recruited by the State Highway Department for a position that had never been held by a woman. Eleanor sat in the audience with Mary, who had traveled from Bitter Creek Hollow for the ceremony. "She did it," Mary whispered. "She did it. Because of you." Eleanor shook her head. "Because of herself. I just showed her what was possible." "That's what mothers do." Mary squeezed her hand. "That's what you've always done." Hope walked across the stage, accepted her diploma, and looked out at the audience. Her eyes found Eleanor's. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Eleanor mouthed 2 words back. "Go higher." December 17, 1960. 8:44 in the morning. 26 years since the storm. Eleanor was 54 years old now, gray in her hair, lines on her face, but still strong, still determined, still working. Hope was 26, married to a good man, working as a civil engineer, already making a name for herself in a field dominated by men. "Tell me the story again," Hope said during their weekly phone call. "You've heard it 1,000 times. Tell me anyway." So Eleanor told it. The storm, the structure, the birth, the survival, the years that followed. When she finished, Hope was quiet. "I'm going to tell my children that story someday." "Are you—" "We're trying." Hope's voice was soft. "I wanted you to know." Eleanor's heart soared. "I'm going to be a grandmother." "Hopefully, if everything works out." "It will. It always does. We're Callahan women. We don't give up." Hope laughed. "No, we don't." March 15, 1961. 3:17 in the morning. Hope called in the middle of the night. "It's a boy," she said, her voice exhausted but radiant. "Healthy. Perfect. 8 pounds 6 ounces. Eleanor was on a train by morning. She arrived at the hospital to find Hope in bed holding a tiny bundle. Her husband stood beside her beaming. "Mama." Hope held out the baby. "Meet James Thomas Callahan Mitchell, named for the soldier I wrote to during the war, and for Daddy." Eleanor took her grandson in her arms. Tiny, perfect, warm. "Hello, James," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." The baby opened his eyes and looked at her. Blue eyes, like Thomas's. "He has your stubbornness already," Hope said. "Wouldn't come out without a fight." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "That's a Callahan for you." December 17, 1970. 7:03 in the morning. 36 years since the storm. Eleanor was 64 now, retired from the commission, living in a small house in Charleston close to Hope and the grandchildren. James was 9. His sister Sarah was 7, both of them full of questions, both of them demanding stories about the old days. "Tell us about the storm, Grandma," James said. "You've heard it before." "Tell us again." So Eleanor told them. The same story she'd told Hope. The same story she'd told audiences across the country. The same story that had started everything. When she finished, Sarah looked at her with serious eyes. "Were you really all alone?" "All alone." "I would have been scared." "I was scared, terrified." "But you did it anyway." "Yes." "How?" Eleanor thought about it. Really thought about it for the first time in years. "Because I had to. Because giving up wasn't an option. Because I had your mother to think about." She paused. "And because I believed that tomorrow could be better than today." "Did it work?" Eleanor looked at her grandchildren. at the life she'd built, at the legacy she was leaving. "What do you think?" Sarah smiled. "I think it worked." "So do I." June 15th, 1980. 2:33 in the afternoon. Eleanor turned 74 in the same year her grandson graduated from high school. James was going to college, engineering like his mother, already talking about designing buildings that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes, already dreaming of changing the world. "You started something, Grandma," he said at his graduation party. "Something bigger than you know." "I built a shed around my house." "You proved that one person can make a difference. That knowledge matters. That refusing to give up is the most powerful thing in the world." He hugged her. "I'm going to make you proud." "You already have." December 17th, 1984, 4:33 in the afternoon. 50 years since the storm. Eleanor was 78 years old, surrounded by family. Hope was there with her husband. James and Sarah with their spouses. Great-grandchildren running through the house. 4 generations. "Speech," someone called out. Eleanor stood slowly. Her bones ached. Her vision wasn't what it used to be, but her mind was sharp and her heart was full. 50 years ago today, I gave birth to a baby girl in the middle of a blizzard. I was alone. I was terrified. I was certain I was going to die. She looked at Hope. "I didn't die. Your mother didn't die. We survived because I built something that everyone said was impossible. Because I refused to give up when giving up would have been so much easier." She looked at her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. "That's the legacy I want to leave you. Not a method, not a building technique. The belief that you can do anything if you're stubborn enough. The faith that tomorrow can be better than today. The courage to pick up a hammer when everyone tells you to stop." She raised her glass. "To the next 50 years. May you all be as stubborn as I was." "To stubbornness." The room echoed, laughing. December 17th, 1987, 7:01 in the morning. Eleanor May Callahan died on the 53rd anniversary of the storm that should have killed her. She passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. Hope was there. James, Sarah, great-grandchildren who would carry her story forward. Her last words were to Hope. "I'm ready," she said. "I've done what I needed to do. The rest is up to you." Hope held her mother's hand as she slipped away. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. Always." And then she was gone. January 1st, 1988, 10:08 in the morning. They buried Eleanor next to Thomas in the cemetery overlooking Bitter Creek Hollow. The whole community came, people from neighboring hollows, from distant counties, from all the places Eleanor had touched over 53 years of building and teaching and refusing to give up. Hope spoke at the funeral. "My mother was the bravest woman I ever knew, not because she wasn't afraid. She was afraid all the time, afraid of failing, afraid of losing, afraid of not being good enough." She paused. "But she did everything anyway. She built when everyone said to stop. She taught when everyone said to be quiet. She loved when everyone said to harden her heart." She looked at the grave. "That's what I want to remember about her. Not the awards, not the fame, not the method that bears her name. I want to remember a pregnant woman standing on a ladder in December, picking up a hammer because she refused to let anyone else decide whether she lived or died." She wiped her eyes. "Rest now, Mama. You've earned it." January 1st, 1988, 3:17 in the afternoon. After the funeral, Hope climbed the hill to the structure. It was still standing, 54 years old, weathered but strong, still doing exactly what it was designed to do. She walked through the gap between walls, running her hands along boards her mother had nailed, feeling history in every grain. On the inner wall, carved into a board, where you could only see it if you knew to look, were words Eleanor had put there the day she finished. For hope, for tomorrow, for everyone who ever refused to give up. Hope traced the letters. "I'll keep going," she whispered. "Same as you taught me." The wind stirred through the vents, carrying air the way it had for more than 50 years. The wood stayed dry. The legacy lived on. And somewhere, Eleanor May Callahan was finally at peace. The neighbors had laughed when she built a shed around her house. They stopped laughing when her firewood stayed dry all winter. They stopped laughing when she survived the worst storm in memory. They stopped laughing when she gave birth alone and lived to tell about it. They stopped laughing when her method spread across the country, saving thousands of lives, changing how people thought about building and survival and what one stubborn woman could accomplish. They stopped laughing because Eleanor May Callahan proved something that the world needed to hear. That courage isn't the absence of fear. That strength isn't the absence of weakness. That success isn't the absence of failure. It's picking up the hammer anyway. It's building when everyone says stop. It's believing in tomorrow when today is trying to kill you. It's refusing to give up no matter what. That's what Eleanor taught her daughter. That's what Hope taught her children. That's what the Callahan method really means. Not boards and gaps in ventilation. Stubbornness, courage, love. The belief that one person armed with nothing but determination and knowledge can change the world. The neighbors laughed when my pregnant mother built a shed around the house. They never laughed again. Because she showed them what was possible. Because she showed them what they could become. Because she showed them that the only thing standing between who we are and who we could be is the courage to pick up a hammer and start building. That's her legacy. That's her gift. That's what she left behind for all of us. And it will never, ever die.